We have come a long way when it comes to the development of electric unicycle suspension system inside of just few years. And this week, we're going to talk about exactly how far we have come by comparing my favorite of the last gen suspension wheel, the Inmotion V11, with the latest and greatest, the Hsiang S22. Are you ready for a war of the suspension? Roll the intro!
Bottom dollar, you were best under pressure.
Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and help spread the gospel of EUC. The Inmotion V11 was the first electric unicycle with suspension ever introduced. I still recall the sense of shock that I got when I first saw the announcement. Here's a wheel that looked like nothing else on the market nor anything else that Inmotion has ever produced in the past, yet still sporting a suspension system that I had at the time thought was still years away. Despite some initial problem with the earlier batches, Inmotion did eventually deliver what became one of my favorite electric unicycle to ride. Reasonably priced, deceptively fast, and nicely appointed. But the question remains, how does it stack up to the latest next-gen suspension wheel from Hsiang? And yes, in dramatic fashion, the demo S20 I had did literally blew up in my face. And despite the fact that there is yet to be satisfactory resolution on the situation, I am confident to say that at some point, hopefully not in too distant of a future, that they will come up with a fix, and eventually we will have a batch that is safe and relatively reliable as it can be for an electric unicycle. So let's talk about what the Hsiang S20 or 22 will be rather than what it is right now. In the challenger's corner, we have the Inmotion V11, the granddaddy of all suspension EUCs, with a 20-inch wheel, a 2200 watt motor, and a 1500 watt-hour battery pack rated at 84 volt, pumping out a top speed of 34 miles per hour and weighing in at 60 pounds. And in the other corner, we have the next-gen suspension wonder wheel, the Hsiang S22, the very first 126-volt wheel ever produced, with a 2200 watt-hour battery pack, a 20-inch wheel, and a 3300 watt motor, pushing the top speed of 45 miles per hour and weighing in at 75 pounds. And as usual, this fight will be a 5-round competition based on my typical review criteria: convenience, design, performance, ride quality, and finally, value. A winner will be declared for each round, and at the end, wheel that won the most number of rounds will be overall winner. With that said, let's get things rolling with the first category, which is convenience. And here is where the smaller size and lighter weight of the Inmotion V11 really gives it an edge. And although 60 pounds is no lightweight by any means, it is still easier to carry up a set of stairs as compared to the 75-pound S22. The lighter weight combined with a better balanced trolley handle also make wheeling the V11 around easier than the S22, and I appreciate the fact that you can still keep the seat attached to the handle when you walk the wheel. And speaking of seated riding, although the S22 does come with a stock seat, the thicker and cushier seat for the V11 combined with its thicker profile makes it a significantly more comfortable wheel to ride seated. The numerical LED display on the S20, although is convenient, doesn't eliminate the need for the Hsiang app in order to change wheel settings, so it doesn't give it as significant of an advantage. Neither is S20's brighter headlights, as it isn't as well directed and focused as compared to the V11. Overall convenience is one of V11's greatest strengths, and very few EUC companies are able to compete with Inmotion's attention to details, and the V11 takes this round. And that brings us to the next topic, which is design. This is almost a rehash of the 2000 2020 competition between the S18 and the V11, considering that both the S18 and the S20 share a similar Hsiang DNA and then strengths and weaknesses. For instance, from a distance, they're both strikingly beautiful wheels, but when you get up close, some of their faults start to show. Things like rougher plastic, larger gaps, and looser parts. There's also the issue that the looks of the S22 for a large part rely on the stock pad, and if you ride aftermarket pads like I do, it kind of loses a bit of its shine. However, design isn't just skin deep, it is also about the innovation of how a wheel is engineered and assembled, and here the S22 impresses. The modular approach, the significantly more robust suspension structure, all scores higher as compared to the much more conservative pedal-only suspension design of the V11. So I'm gonna call it a draw here. Despite holding its own, the next two will likely be a tough road for the V11. There's simply no way that an 84-volt wheel sporting the prior gen suspension could compete with the S20, a 126-volt with far more power, battery capacity, as well as top speed. When it comes to acceleration, braking, and torque, the S22 easily come out on top. Matter of fact, when it comes to performance, just about the only thing the Inmotion V11 can match the S22 on is its range. At 84 volt and with a smaller motor, it sieves rather than gulp those electrons. And despite the smaller battery pack, the V11 can cover as much distance as the S22, yes, at a good bit slower pace. But the caveat to any range question would always be this, that it is wholly depending on a whole lot of factors: rider weight, average ride speed, road condition, temperature, altitude, wind speed. In other words, the delta of the amount of mileage you can squeeze out of a wheel is actually huge. And the only guarantee for maximizing your range is simply getting the electric unicycle with the largest battery pack available, period. Like the Sherman Max or the Commander, but then you'd be missing out on the most important innovation in the EUC world, which is of course suspension. Speaking of which, that brings us to the question of ride feel. Unfortunately, here is where the prior gen V11 really comes up short. Structurally, the V11 relies on a single pair of sliders centrally located as its primary means of support, compared to the double pair of sliders with one located at each corner of the wheel on the S20. The result of which is a lot more lateral flex as compared to the S22. It's like the difference between standing on a table with 4 legs as compared to one that only has 2. You're always going to get more flex based on geometry alone. I remember a specific instance when I rode the S22 past a wet manhole cover at speed, and I felt the tire slip ever so slightly and shifted my weight to compensate for it, as compared to a near crash on the V11 where an asymmetrical weight shift led to frame flex and a violent death wobble that nearly took me out. Definitely not good. Along with tighter control, you also get a much more robust progressive spring suspension as compared to the very basic and very bouncy air piston on the V11. Bounciness is fine from a comfort perspective, but terrible if your goal is primarily to increase traction, as every millisecond the wheel spends shifting your way up translate to reduced power transfer and control, which isn't great from a performance perspective, but even worse when it comes to rider feedback. Something I must point out is especially problematic for a self-balancing vehicle, which utilizes subtle weight shifting as a primary means of control. For all of those reasons, the Hsiang S20 wins the ride feel round. And finally, we have to talk about that toughest of criteria to judge value. The price of these two wheels are drastically different, with the V11 coming in at almost 2/3 of the price of the Hsiang S20. And despite the many performance advantages of the S22 has over the V11, it isn't exactly 30% better. Having spent the last 2 weeks since the death of the S20 riding the V11, it does most of the thing I need a wheel to do, as in getting me around the city quickly and efficiently. But I'm going to argue argue that the premium for the S20 is not only justified, and my primary argument for it is based on where electric unicycle are as a technology when it comes to maturity, and that is unfortunately not very. None of the wheels available for purchase are fully dependable nor as predictable as we like them to be. Considering the number of new riders joining the sports on a regular basis, which is an awesome thing, but that also means that we are all, as a group, a little bit green when it comes to ride experiences. And since for all self-balancing vehicle, that every single bit of performance increase directly translate to additional safety margin, safety is one of those things that, in my opinion, is always worth paying the premium for, considering the inherent risk that comes with doing this sort of things. And with that last round settled, the fight goes to the Hsiang S22. And I'm sure everyone at this point would have their own opinions on this, and that is what the comment section below is for. And you know what? Aha! I somehow managed to trick you into wasting another 15 minutes of your life, but I hope you enjoyed it. Shout out to my supporter on Patreon. Please check out the link in the video description below if you enjoy and like to support my work. And as always, as much as we all love electric unicycle, the only way for us to get better wheel is to grow as a community. So tell your friend, teach them how to ride, and get them hooked. Until the next video, thank you.